Today's species spotlight is on one of the most indistinguishable species of snake on the planet, and that is, of course, the black-headed python. So these guys come from Australia. Their range is basically the top third of the continent, mostly in Queensland and the Northern Territory. Now, these guys belong to a genus of snake called Aspidites, and there's only two species in that genus, one being, of course, the blackhead, the other being the Woma python that we've actually done a whole video about as well. Now, the Womas are almost half the size of these guys. These are very large snakes. Hey, you're fine. The blackhead, they're very large, as I said before. The females are, in fact, larger. They average 6 to 8 feet, but have been recorded with not unregularity over 10. So huge, huge snakes. Now, these guys, as I said before, they're pythons. I haven't worked with this guy a whole lot, so he's going to be moving quite a bit. The female being larger, she's over 8 feet long, but she's being really grumpy right now, so that's why we have him out. These guys, they're kind of really weird pythons. So when we think about Australia, normally we think about that kind of like sandy red rock desert, and that's where womas are sometimes found. These guys actually prefer more tropical to semi-arid parts. So there are places where you find like kookaburras and things like the jungle carpet pythons. That's kind of where these guys are found, to open savannas and grasslands and even farm pastures and things like that. Now, when you look at these guys, you'll notice some really odd characteristics which really distinguish the blackheads and the womas from other species of python. The first thing when you look at is how they're head shaped. They have very small heads. A lot of the boas and pythons have pretty large, pronounced heads. These guys are pretty narrow, as well as they lack heat pits. And their head shape is also a little kind of weird. And every single one of these things has a very specific purpose and adaptation for their survival out in the wild. So their smaller heads and that kind of weird shaped head is because these guys spend a lot of time looking for things in burrows, underground, getting under fallen trees and logs like that. So that small head is very good for getting under things as well as for burrowing. Their eyes are a little bit further up on their heads, not quite as far as the womas, but they're a little bit further up, which is a big part of that as well. And then they don't have those traditional heat pits like I've talked about. So a lot of pythons, even the pit vipers like rattlesnakes, they have those heat-sensing pits along the top part of their jaw. They don't really have that. Now, there have been studies that they've shown that there might be a primitive heat-sensing organ. Basically, it's almost like a cluster of nerves that's sitting under the bottom of their rostral scale, so their upper lip right here, on the bottom of that, there's a cluster of nerves that might be more heat-sensitive, which might be more of like a primitive version of those heat pits. And the main reason why we think that they don't really have that is because their main diet in the wild seems to be mostly reptiles. And these guys are, in fact, known snake eaters. So in the wild, a lot of their diet consists of skinks, bearded dragons, small monitors, and lots of snakes, including both Woma pythons, blackheads, earpiece is falling, and venomous elapids like the eastern brown and even the king brown, the mulga snake. And they have found that these guys seem to be immune to most of, if not all of, the venom that all those very venomous, famously venomous snakes seem to have. So these guys are just really, really crazy large snakes. Now, that being said, if you decided you wanted to bring one home as a pet, these guys are fairly uncommon in the hobby, but they're getting more and more popular. And he's now held on to the bottom of the table, but that's okay. These guys are kind of classified in the kind of pay what you get snake, to where these guys, they can be produced by a lot of different people, but the quality genetics and lines, you're paying for that. These guys are famous for several different things, including a Swiss line, which comes out of Switzerland, which have very clean and defined lines, as well as there's even a xanthic line. So that's that morph, that recessive morph, which gets rid of the yellows, so it becomes more of a gray and black snake with that very dark black head. Now, unfortunately, that's about all we have here in the States. These guys can have quite a bit of variation of their body color, where it can be really yellow, really red, even kind of like an orange, really light, bright, but that's mostly restricted to Australia because, like all Australian species, for the most part, there is no extra, they can't be exported. I was going to say extradite. they can't be exported out of Australia. So really what we have to work with is what we have in the States or in several other countries like places in Europe or even a couple places even in Africa. But that's really about all that we have to work with these guys. Now, I talked about the different variations of the colors, although for the most part, if you ever see a blackhead, this is pretty much what their bodies look like. But if you look at their head, there's a pretty obvious reason why they're named that. In fact, their Latin name is melanocephalus, which means black head. So there's a pretty good reason as to why we think they in fact have that black head, and that's due to cryptic basking. So all snakes in general are fairly cryptic creatures. Even being apex predators where they're eating things, they still end up being prey to larger mammals or even birds of prey. What they do, in fact, when they want to bask to get that ultraviolet light and the heat from the day, is they'll expose sometimes just very small parts of their body to the sun to get that warmth and ultraviolet radiation. These guys, they think they develop that like ink-dipped head to where they can keep their entire body submerged underground or hidden under a burrow, under a log, and only expose that little top part of their bodies because black, darker colorations absorb heat and ultraviolet light much more rapidly and much more efficiently. So that way they can thermoregulate, get that ultraviolet light very quickly and efficiently while only exposing the small part of their head to be exposed to predators, which conveniently enough happen to be where their eyes are, so they can also help kind of keep a lookout for things. Now, we talked about keeping these guys in captivity. So as I said before, very uncommon, get what you pay for. These guys come with a very hefty price tag. In fact, it's very rare to find one under $1,000 even for a little baby. These guys, as you can see, very large snakes that requires very large enclosures, which means that you need to think about where you're going to put that, the price of the caging. They're going to need several as they grow. As far as feeding goes, I've heard a lot of you are being super silly. I've heard a lot of really conflicting things from breeders who have kept them for a long time, reproduced them several times, to where some animals like this, because they can be very active and because they eat very lean meals in the wild, they eat more regularly, more often, and usually smaller meals. So a lot of the time, and these guys they can do pretty well on rodents, although sometimes babies have a hard time getting on rodents. It seems like some people will feed smaller meals more often, except for when it comes time to like ready for egg laying season. And then I know that other people, they take a more traditional aspect where it's a very large python and they feed them more sparse meals, but larger meals. Both seem to produce very excellent results as far as both care and breeding goes. I don't have too much of an opinion on that, but I look forward to trying that. The person who I got these from did feed the larger meals. So that's what they've had. This will be twice now that they've had that, so we'll see how that goes. And then I will look forward to maybe trying to do a couple smaller meals a little bit more often, as well as, since we talked about they eat a lot of reptiles out in the wild, maybe I'll try to get like the reptile ingredient Reptilinks, and maybe try to do something with that to see if they respond to that, because I think a varied diet is something that only a small part of the community is really getting into, especially when it comes to snakes. Lizards, it's a little bit easier, but with snakes, most of the time we just stick to the staple of rats and mice. But there can be a little bit of variety that we can give to these guys, and Reptilinks I think would be a very good option, especially for an animal that very specifically eats a lot of reptiles in the wild. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I have a whole playlist if you guys want to check out a bunch of other different species. It's called Species Spotlight. If you click on that list, helps YouTube with the little algorithm and the click-through rate that allows YouTube to know that I exist. If you guys want future updates and like behind-the-scene things, as well as knowing things before I release them on YouTube or other social media, you can check out my Patreon. I have a bunch of different rewards and different levels that you can do to help kind of support me, because this is kind of what I'm doing at this point full-time, and I'd love to be able to provide even more for these guys as we chug along, and hopefully you guys enjoy the content that I'm giving you guys. That, not to say that I'm ever going to stop. I love being able to just sit here and talk about these guys and sharing with everyone. So again, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you would like questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, leave it down at the bottom of this video. If you can, please go check out US Ark. You've probably heard me and other people talk about it at length, but if you still haven't done it, I have a link at the bottom of the description of this video and all of my videos. You can go check them out. Please go support US Ark and help us be able to continue to keep these guys, because that is under attack at the moment. Now, so unfortunately ending that with a bit of a diner, but we're back around. Again, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hope you're having a great day, and we will check you next time.